Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am talking to my network essential students. This is our second week, and I must say, all of you guys have did magnificent, magnificent, magnificent. Kudos to you all. So let's talk about the second week. Now, the second week, we're going to focus on the hardware, the particulars in the hardware that's important. So let's go. This is brought to you by Cengage and Cisco. I did a mixture of the two because I wanted to hit home on some various things. So let's move on. Now, as you can see, we want to explain what a switch is. And when we talk about switch, we talk about a network switch. We want to explain that to you and get you in. Then we want to talk about the access points, why access points are important. Then we want to follow that up by going into the NIC card. You will hear us use the term the NIC card, which is called the network interface card. And then we want to finish off explaining what a router is. Now, these are considered the two big dogs in the networking industry, the switch and the router. And I like to say the switch is the workhorse of the network. And when I'm talking about networks, I'm talking about all networks. And a router is just, to me, the stabilizer. It allows us to communicate with everyone. So let's move forward. Okay, these are the devices you will be working on. So you just had a chance to go in Packet Tracer and break these devices down. The key terms I want you to take away from this, and this is brought to you by Cisco, is end devices. As you can see at the very top, these are your end devices. This can be a laptop, this can be a cell phone, this can be a tablet. These are considered end devices. And to remember what an end device is, all you have to do is think like this. An end device is something that I can touch and feel and use to send and receive information. Remember that. An end device is something that I can touch and feel to use to send and receive information. Now, I know as a lot of my colleagues be like, there's other things that can be considered that too. But for you, keep it basic, keep it simple. That's what it means. Now, we have these intermediate devices, and that's what we're going to talk about today, the intermediate devices. That's your routers, that's your switches, that's your access points. So these are the intermediate devices. You can see you got multi-layer routers, you got wireless routers, you got firewall, you have LAN switches. It's all different types of devices in those intermediate, but it basically boils down to a firewall, a router, a switch, and a wireless access point. So just remember that. When we in the networking industry talk about media, we basically talking about the various things that we call the cables. Okay, so when you think of media, you probably think of somebody on a TV show or something. When we think of media, we're talking about the cabling to connect the devices. We call that media. Whether it's a wireless media, whether it's a LAN, or whether it's a WAN media, it's always the cabling. So when you hear somebody in the network IT industry talk about media, you know they're talking about the cabling. Okay, now we're here, and we're just going to give you some basic information on each one of these devices. We're going to start out with the switch. Now, in order to understand the switch, just remember the switch works with the actual information. You know, when you see them ones and zeros, the bytes and the bits, that's what the switch works with. Also, data is sent into the media one frame at a time. So when the data goes into the medium, remember I told you the medium is the actual cabling one frame at a time. Each frame has a destination MAC address and a destination source address. These are just addresses where the information came from and where the information is going. That's all it is. You know, where we sending it, where we going, just like you would do a regular letter when you sending information out. When the frame reaches a switch, the switch reads both addresses. So once that frame comes in on a port, the switch reads the destination MAC address and it reads the source address, and then it forwards it to where it should go. Now, how does the switch do this? It keeps a table. Some people call it the switching table, but in the industry, we call it a MAC table. And this is just basic information you need to know about switch, but keep this in your mind. Let's go to the next one. Now, we're here and we're looking at a switch. Remember, we just talked about all these particulars, so as you can see, here are approximately 4 PCs, and we have this switch here. Now, here's the switch MAC table, or as some would say, the switching table. Now, it has approximately the ports. So if you look at this port, you got port 1, you got port 3, you got port 2, and you got port 6 right there. So these are the ports that each one of these PCs are logged into. Now you have MAC addresses. And trust me, this MAC address you see here, this is just an abbreviation of it. The MAC address is usually a lot longer. But you see the MAC addresses here. But remember, that's an abbreviation. It's more characters than that. So as you can see, the switch is keeping an account of each one of the devices that it is connected to. And that's what the MAC table is for. The MAC table is to list all the devices that this particular switch is connected to. And why? For forwarding purposes. It want to make sure it forwarded to the appropriate place. Let's recap about the switch. The first thing is a switch operation can be summarized in these steps. So let's break down the steps. The switch receiver frame. Remember, when we think of switches, I want you to lock this in. When you think of switches, think of frames, because it's another device called a router. When we think of routers, we think of packets, but think of the frame. Switch reads the source and the destination address. Remember, when the frame comes in, it has attached to it the source and the destination address. What else do I need to know, Professor? Well, you also need to know that the switch has a MAC table. So I'm calling it a switching table, but for the industry, we call it a MAC table. MAC table has an address of all these different devices. The switch forwards the frame to the port where the computer that owns it will receive it. So just remember, as that packet comes into the switch reads its MAC table and sends it out. The switching table is updated with the source MAC address and port information. This device consistently updates its MAC table to make sure it has the most appropriate information. Okay, now we're looking at packet tracer. And I just want to put a couple of switches on here. So in your last assignment, you had to go on here and drop a couple of switches in here. So you selected the switching area, and then you came over here and started dropping switches on here. So these are your switches right here. As we proceed on, we're going to throw some devices on here, and we're going to learn how to use these devices. But just notice this. This says 2960, 24. That means if I hover over here, I'll see 24 ports in there that I could be able to connect 24 different devices. That means PCs, etc., etc. I'll be able to connect to these devices. Okay, let's move to the next lesson. Let's talk about wireless access points. Remember, we're going to keep this video log short. Wireless access points are just devices that allow us to connect our routers, our switches, our PCs to be able to access things wirelessly. Most of you, if not all of you, already have some wireless device that you use. Well, guess what? It's your cell phone. So the heart of wireless networks is the wireless access point, which in some cases you can't see it. All communications passes through the AP, and that's what we said for short, AP, wireless access point. Most small businesses and home networks use a device typically called a wireless router. Now that wireless router that you use at home is a little bit different because it's a router, it's a switch, it's an AP, it's a 3-in-1. Just remember that. And most wireless access points work off a LAN. Okay, so here is a typical wireless access point. Now, if you walk around your workplace or your school, you will see something like this, a wireless access point where it is wireless connection so your devices can function on it. And as you can see, a wireless router combines an access point, a switch, and a router together. So you can pretty much connect to it. You already know this though, but you may not see them at your job or in the school. Let's talk about the network interface card. Now, in every device, there is a network interface card. In laptops, it's built in. It's built on the motherboard. And the main purpose of the network interface card is to give you network access or wireless access. So, to really understand the network access card, or in short, we call it the NIC, embedded inside of your laptops, embedded inside of your PCs, you have a cable cord that connects to it that sends a bunch of ones and zeros in there. And once it gets inside the card, it begins to bring the frame in. And you can see now that the frame has the destination MAC address, the destination source address. And remember, I said the MAC address was longer. So if you take a look at this MAC address, you can see these two addresses are long. It also has the destination IP address and the source IP address. That's when you're working on bigger networks. Remember, most PCs do have or receive an IP address. And then you have other things in here to make sure that this device is working. So remember, the NIC card receives all this information in the form of a frame. And once, remember that the router is the most important device within our network. Now, of course, the switch is, of course, the wireless access port is too, but just make sure you understand the router. Let's take a look. Now, this is just a real small picture of how a router looks when it's at work. You have two switches, and mostly it's always switches connected to routers, but you have two switches that are connected to this particular router. Now, in this setup here, you can see that there are multiple things that this router can do. The router receives packets, and it forwards packets. The router decides on how the data should travel inside the router, outside the router. The router is really in control, and that's the name, routes. It routes all the information. So let's go to our desktop and take a quick look at putting the router in. Now, so we already established that we have approximately 2 different switches here, right? So let's go ahead and drop a router in. So if I come down here and I click on any router, I can bring that router up and put it here. As you just saw, the router that was set up on that picture, we're going to do a real short version of that. I can come over here and grab 2 PCs and put them in here. And then also I can come over here and grab another switch, okay, another switch, and throw that over here. And then add 2 PCs to this particular device. So I can put 2 PCs there for this particular device. There you go. And for this particular switch here, I can drop in 2 PCs here. So you are now learning how to design a network. Now I want to cable everything up, so I'm going to come get this cable, and I'm going to do fast Ethernet, and then I'm going to choose one here, and then I'm going to get this cable here, and I'm going to do fast Ethernet, and I'm going to choose one here. This is what IT managers do all the time. They actually come in here and actually set up a design on how they want their network to look. So you're shaping out a design for your network. And it's really not that hard to do. Although I'm moving really fast, you can see this is a simple process, and you had the chance to play around with this process yourself. Really simple stuff, right, people? Really simple. Okay, so now I can actually take this here and connect it here and go make a connection to the router. Now watch this situation. I may not have the ports for the router. Okay, I have one port there, But see, that right there may not be the best connection. And when you're working in the real world of routers, you may want to make some changes. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to turn this router off. And I'm going to go get another access card to put in this router. And as you can see, I'm flipping through the different types of access cards that I can put in this particular router. I want something really robust to put in here. And so far, I can see that this would mainly be the one that I put in there. So I can actually put these devices in there, turn the router back on, and they up and working. So let's go ahead and close this. Now I'm going to take this particular cable off, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to grab another one of the cables to cable up this router here and use the appropriate port. See, now I can use any one of these ports and hook it up. And I just wanted to show you that you can make changes like that to the router. Now, will we set it up like this? No, but just doing a little demonstration of what you already been through, you can see that we can hook up these particular devices. Now, these switches are going into the router. So people, this is the basic setup. Now, you may say, well, Professor, where's the wireless router? I can come over here and also go back into my devices, click on my routers, and pull up a wireless router down here. Now, sometimes you got to read carefully to see which one is the wireless router, but I'm going to get some with antennas anyway. So I'm going to come over here and just grab an AP from over here, okay, and drop that in. So there is a wireless router. So if I click on that, you see all these different ports here, okay. Now I could ideally come here, grab one of these devices, and then come over here and connect it here. Now guess what? I have a wireless router for people who are coming into the organization and they want to connect to the network. Okay, keeping this video log really short, I wanted to give you a basic understanding of all of these different devices that we use. Remember, this is your intermediate devices. We wanted to know what a wireless access point was. We wanted to know what a router was. We wanted to know what a switch was. And we want to basically get an understanding. Now, all of these devices have a NIC card embedded inside of them. So we wanted you to basically get an understanding of this.